at times what they do, they write and then they read the information from the write-up, which could be hidden. And but then for discussions, you are right. People may not express, but my concern was in the case of clustering them and the big cadres. Ideally, even themselves, they are not supposed to. They are not supposed to actually dig the weaknesses of the institution. The role of administrators is to support the institution. So in that case, maybe if you are okay with either going with biased information or maybe taking it as an outlier, but that would be expected according to me.
I think I wouldn't worry. Because we have now having these different groups of people, for example, categorized in their fitting session as administrators, and then the clinicians alone, and also some of these they double. They are both clinicians and also administrators. But one thing you must know is that in qualitative research, as people, the other people in their group, for example, the subordinates versus bosses, if the bosses are trying to paint the company a good picture, and then the organization, the subordinates are speaking something contrary. Now, in qualitative research, that is encouraging because it gives a balance and then, of course, for example, you have to state, let's say maybe in Chisizi Hospital, participants reported, administrators, of course, reported having a good working climate, or maybe the environment is safer. But you can say, however, some participants noticed that their payments are delayed. You see? So now in qualitative, so based on the illustrative quotes that have been demonstrated, so the data that you collect, so it depends on the skill of the data analyst on how to convey the message. It's like how we go to a party. There are people report, we have all gone to the party, but we report things differently. Someone will come and say, food was nice. But the other one will say, food was nice, but salt was too much. Those are two different perspectives. So you're not limited. So it goes back to how you're capturing the kind of information. So having these groups, we allow them the liberty to talk about what they feel, but also the subordinates will give them the liberty so that they can freely express themselves. And of course, people judge. You can judge and see that based on the administrator's perspective, this is what they say, but according to the staff perspectives, this is what they suggest. Yeah, so, but if a hospital like Windy, if there is an open work policy, that's a very good thing. But an outsider, they don't know. Yeah, they don't know that is what is on ground. So to be on a safer side, you can combine them, especially if the information is not eliciting information that might put these workers in trouble. Yeah, but things that that are sensitive to an organization and may put some of these people, you have to protect, because if you're not careful, then it means that your research has exposed participants' problems. Because if I come to your focus group discussion and then later I'm interdicted or fired, then it means that your research has caused harm. You did not think about the beneficence. Yeah, so you have to put measures. So sorry. So categorizing these people per the kind of data that we want, it can make these people comfortable. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dot Lang.
Larger groups we have already highlighted. Of course, the rule of thumb, a focus group discussion should at least be between 6 to 10 individuals. Yeah, 6 should be the minimum and 10 should be the maximum. Yeah, because the larger becomes, now that becomes a workshop. So how do you plan a focus group discussion? Of course, create a discussion guide. You need a focus group discussion guide. So designate a skilled facilitator or the person that is going to conduct this focus group discussion. Usually the PI and the note taker, who is usually the research assistant. Provide financial arrangements with you need to think about whether there will be compensation or refreshments. So you can't call people. Usually, focus group discussions do not end. You see the meetings that you go through. You plan for 1 hour, but then they take 1.5 hours, except those that are controlled. So in the case of, so you need to think about, so inviting people to come and stay 1 hour. How are they going to come? Will they put in their transport and they come and give you information and then go back and put in their transport? That's not fair. You have to think about how we talked about this, compensating them and and also providing refreshments as you're carrying out the focus group discussion. You need to plan for equipment and supplies like audio recorders, notepads where you're going to record this kind of information. Yeah, think about the data analysis plan. Think about which kind of information will I need from the
Here, you will write the name of
from this focus group discussion. There is what we call a debrief. A debrief is like those key points that you have gotten from, like an abstract. When you're reading a paper, each paper has an abstract. So you need to think about, for example, what are those, what the debrief is, as you're not writing notes, you need to, those are key points that, for example, someone is talking, like how I'm teaching, and you're just noting down important things. You're not writing everything you talk about, but there are those things you just document and say, this is very important. And then, of course, you need to think about anticipating or compensating for no shows. Yeah, not everyone that you invite will actually come. People get challenges. You invite them to come for an interview. Maybe they've gone for the burial, or they have been invited. They can cancel. Yeah, so as you're planning for a focus group discussion of a focus group of 10 people, you might get like 6. So you need to plan for no shows. Estimate the no-show rate and oversample. So instead of calling 10, you call 12 or you call 13. If they all come, that's good. If they don't come, that's all right. Yeah, so all right, so that you don't, it's rare to invite 10 people and all of them show up. From experience, they don't. So you need to call as many people. You can set reminders. You can assure them of compensation. How will they be compensated if they participate in your research? And then, of course, site selection is important. Place is very important. You need to think about the place that is easier to be accessed by all the participants. The location should be neutral, as in a place where people feel open to speak about topic under the study. You can't call people to come to a police station. Say, you know what, we shall be at CPS at 2 p.m. for a focus group discussion. Ugandans will not allow. So you have to think about a neutral location that makes people feel comfortable and also to openly speak. Those of you that invite pregnant women or mothers that are not to, fancy places, you put them in a hotel, and some people might get scared. Those of you that are research assistants on some projects, you realize that even people fear you when you see them. They have that inferiority complex. So you must make them feel at home and to become comfortable. Make sure that there is no noise. Don't put them in a place that has a lot of disruption. And then, of course, in a place that is safer, where the discussion is not likely to be overheard, mostly comfortable and quiet. Of course, think about how to maintain confidentiality. So, because what is said is heard by all. So when you speak out something, everyone will hear it. So you need to make sure, how do you guard against that? Of course, risks of requiring participants to interact with individuals that they are not comfortable with. Yeah. You know, someone might, yeah, you might go and you're carrying out a study, like I said, you land on your ex and you, or maybe you stole some. Last time I was going to work and met a guy was said, "Who are you? That is a thief." The guy was, I think the guy had stolen someone's money and he had forgotten. So as the guy was moving, he landed on him. Yeah, so you can. They were talking about. I was reading a video, watching a video of a thief who went to court, putting on the exhibit. He went to court putting on. He was accused of stealing a shirt. And then, so he appeared in the courtroom with the same shirt. So how do you do that person? So also in this case, of course, you might be there interviewing. For example, now those of us that deal with patients, you might find a guy stole from you, and you know this person, and is your participant. How would you deal with him? Yeah. So all those are very important aspects. Of course, you need to think about to design the discussion guides. You cannot carry out a focus group discussion without a discussion guide. So this involves questions that reflect the research question. So these are typically between 5 to 10 open-ended questions. Yeah, so you need to create a logic flow. So the questions that you're trying to ask, you can start with an introductory question. For example, how are you? Tell me about this mobile application that you received. That is an introductory question. And someone will tell you, you know what, this intervention is very good. It reminded me to take my medication, blah, blah. And then you put substantial questions in the middle. You know, the questions about the intervention or what you are trying to ask. And then you put conclude session questions or wrap-up questions. For example, asking the participants state the most important element of the discussion. Yeah, so as a researcher, the role of researchers is that these focus groups work best when two researchers are present, and that is the facilitator or the moderator, yeah, that is responsible for leading the group discussion and covering the questions from the guide. And then most importantly is the note taker or the observer that is responsible for taking detailed notes of the discussion. Of course, you're recording, but there are things you can capture, for example, the response, the facial expression. When someone is speaking something, you can record, and those are very important. And then, of course, a facilitator. The role of a facilitator is create a safe and relaxed environment, introduce the discussion topics using the guide, and also keep the discussion focused. Of course, like we've seen, there are people who talk a lot, and there are people that overshadow others, and there are people who beat around the bush, they meander. You tell them about something and they just meander. So it is your role to actually bring them to order. Yeah, and then of course, a facilitator is not an expert on the topic. Yeah, don't just someone can speak things and say, hey, you have lied to us. Yeah, so you have to, you need to be careful so that you don't overshadow. Because you're not an expert on the topic. It's the people that you called that are actually experts on the topic. And then yes, and then of course the note taker is of course facilitates the conversation among all members. Oh, sorry, the facilitator facilitates conversation among all members of the group, encourages shy people. That's why you're in a discussion and say, now, what do you say about this? Anthony Buana, what do you say about this? You're encouraging those shy people to participate also, to feel like they have not been overshadowed. Yes, and also controlling dominant members. There are members who want to talk. You invite them for a meeting, they talk, they say, so you must put measures so that these dominant members are not over. You control them. They are not overshadowed, and with your skill, the skill that you employ can actually make this very important. And then, of course, good facilitation skills include maintaining the focus. There are people that they can beat around the bush. You're talking about the employees' well-being, and someone talks about, like, for example, of course they are using examples, but not everything is relevant. So you need to maintain the focus, silence. You can use probes like we are going to see, and then of course control reactions that we are going to see ahead. There are several challenges, of course, discussions, like we've said, status and power inequalities. We have subgroup formation. There will be people that will create groups and say, for example, like how Otim was saying, I think this and this and whatever. I think so you realize there will be groups, for example, in that focus group discussion, there will be subgroups, there will be people that will be pro and there will be some people that will be against. So you need to, and when they happen, for example, you might find that one is hurting the other. So you need to also be aware of that. There are upset participants also. For example, the discussion can result in, can upset participants. And the participant gets offended. They get offended, or maybe because of the topic. So you need to think about referral services. And also, you review the guide for particularly sensitive questions, because we say focus group discussions are not nice for sensitive questions. And then, of course, we have how do you deal with these participants? We have two types of participants. We have the dominant ones, and also we can have shy participants. Now, these are problematic because if a participant is shy, it means that they are not answering. They are not going to give you the questions that you want. And if they are dominant, it means that they will overshadow the shy ones. So you need, for dominant participants, you can use non-verbal cues. For example, no eye contact. For example, if you know that Patrick speaks a lot, you may not look in his direction. Even when the hand is up, you just look at Wilson's direction. Invite others to speak. You can say, Patrick, we shall invite you, but let's first hear what Anthony Buana is saying. And then, of course, don't confront them. Yeah, there are people who want to speak, they even speak. You don't have to confront them. And then shy ones, you need to reassure them, reassure the group that all contributions are valued, and allow for silence. Make sure, allow them to speak. There are people who are not eloquent. There are people who speak when they are quaking and shivering. So allow room for that. And then, of course, maximize eye contact. Keep eye contact with them. Give them eye contact. Yes, and also you can always link the question to individual's background. For example, if you want to look at the question about security, can say now, Patience, you are best. You as a police officer, what do you say about this? Or you as an IT person, what do you say about this? Or you as a finance person, what do you say about this? As you're doing that, you are encouraging them to participate. So what do you do to set the scene? Of course, thank the participants. You can welcome them and thank them for turning up. Provide brief review or purpose of the discussion, and then establish the ground rules. For example, not interrupting. No interrupting. Say when someone is talking, you don't have to interrupt. Don't interrupt until someone has done what? Has finished. And then encourage them to only share what they are comfortable, when they feel comfortable sharing, contributing to, and then explicitly discuss confidentiality because the confidentiality in focus group discussions, like I've said, what is said is heard by all. So you need to maintain confidentiality, yes, please. And also compare, of course, the individual interviews. And then let every member introduce themselves, and then you can provide an opening topic that is simple for everyone to talk about, and then you go ahead with your discussion, and then you conclude the discussion. So as a facilitator, let the conversation progress naturally. Resist the need to talk. Some of us talk so much, someone can't. So, but you need to resist it, because we have said that these participants that you have invited, they are experts on the subject. And then pay attention to what has been said before. Don't repeat questions because it is nagging. Yeah, if you ask someone a question, it's like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Every question, this question is so it keeps on coming, but it is not nice. Always be careful. If someone has already answered the question, well, you don't have to repeat it. And then allow participants to carry a conversation to a topic that is on the question guide, even if it is out of the sequence. You know, there are people you can ask a question, and then someone gives a response that is, for example, you have a guide of 10 questions, and you start with question 1, but you're surprised someone answers question number 7. So you don't have to stop them. You don't have to say, hey, stop there. We shall talk about that when we reach there. No, it means that you've killed the flow. You've killed the flow. So you have to allow the participants carry out the conversation to a topic. Despite the change in the sequence of the guide, know your discussion guide well, know your questions very well, so that if someone answers question number 9, don't bring it back. And then introduce the new question or redirect when the conversation slows down. And when the conversation goes off track, you can say, for example, that's an interesting point, but how does this relate to this? Yeah, so you appreciate. You don't say, you, now what are you talking about? No, you have to redirect the conversation and be aware and careful of the time. Very important. Yeah, make people very cautious with time. So it's very important to think about that. And then, of course, the role of the observer, the note taker, they help assist with the logistics, they manage the recording equipment, they provide feedback to the facilitator. For example, if the topic is not covered, they observe and take notes, they debrief with the facilitator, and they compile data for transcription. So I said the debriefs, these are just the hot things about an interview. So when you do those things, you can carry out debrief sessions immediately after the focus group discussion. This whereby the facilitator and the note taker meet to reflect on and evaluate, and then suggest improvements or make adjustments to the guide for the next focus group discussions, as the note taker completes notes and transcriptions as soon as possible. So the kind of data generated from focus group discussions, of course, there are transcripts. The transcripts I've told you about. And then, of course, we have supplementary notes from the note taker that involves description of what has happened, and impressions that, for example, if someone was talking about, for example, if someone is in a meeting or you're in a focus group discussion and someone say, in this organization, our salaries are paid on time, and then they blink, and you know that a blink, or maybe they just make some facial expression, and all members know it. To that one, a recording might not capture it, but you as a note taker, you can understand that although he has said it, there is need for verification. So it's very important. So debriefs play an important role because they help us to understand the impressions as statements were being made. Yeah. And then, of course, data analysis. We can, of course, after we've carried out focus group discussions, we have got our data through transcriptions and debriefs. You can carry out data analysis. You analyze the data. For example, so this data analysis can be two-way, can be inductive, it can be deductive. When you talk about inductive, categories are derived from the data, or things are derived from the data, while deductive categories are pre-designated. When we talk about inductive approach of qualitative or content analysis, for example, if you go to the field and you're analyzing your transcripts, it is about what have researchers noted, what have these participants documented, what is new. But deductive, on the other hand, it looks at, it considers, for example, you have a set of themes that you go to the field. When you think about a theory like the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology, or the Utaut model, it has four domains, that is perceived expectance, effort, yes, and then also social influence and facilitating conditions. So in that way, if, for example, if you go to that field, you want as you're analyzing your data, you want to look for themes about facilitating conditions. Yeah, the themes, for example, about facilitating conditions. Those are the things you want to look at. It means that if something comes and it is outside facilitating conditions, you're not interested in it. That is a deductive approach. The categories are pre-designed. You go to the data, you're analyzing this data with a pre-designed or pre-designated themes that you are interested in. If you go to a transcript and someone is talking about future use, and it is not in the four domains of the Utaut model or constructs, it means you will ignore them. But in inductive approach, the categories are derived from the data. Now, as you're reviewing the transcripts, you gain new insights. For example, so you're surprised by the data. Understand? You don't have any. It's like going. Let me use this example. It's like thieves. If a thief goes to the house and they want to steal a laptop, or a TV or electronics, it means if something, they will not steal beans, they will not steal meat. They will steal the fridge, they will steal the TV, they will steal the laptop, the gadgets. Now, that is deductive. The thief has gone to the house, but they know what they are going to steal. If they find clothes that are just there, they will not carry them. They will just steal what they have gone to steal. Yeah. But in inductive, this is a thief that steals everything he finds. He'll steal saucepans, steal phones, he'll steal. So everything they meet, as long as it is stealable, they will take it. Now that is a difference between inductive and deductive. So deductive is that one thief that steals. They know what they want from the house. If they don't find it, they will not take anything. Yeah, that is a thief. That is deductive. But in inductive, a thief steals anything they find as long as it is stealable. So an inductive, so if you're in your research methods, if you're stating that you're going to use an inductive approach for analyzing qualitative data, and I expect that you will go to the field as you carry out these interviews, and the data will be generated, Sorry, the categories or themes are going to be derived from the data. But in deductive, if you say that you're going to use a deductive approach, it means that you have a pre-designated themes of your interest, and you're going to review the transcripts to find those things that are relevant. I don't know whether that is very clear. So usually, of course, this is guided by a theory or conceptual framework. There are many theories depending on what you are interested in. In the morning, I shared with you guys about the implementation research. I talked about the consolidated framework for implementation research. There is a model called the COMB model, COMB model, that talks about the capability, opportunities, and motivators for behavior. I developed one of the frameworks called the TRIMI frameworks that talks about the training. For example, if you want to implement the mobile health interventions in our low resource settings, you think about training, you think about restructuring the environment, you think about mandating, incentivizing the participants, and how the intervention will be integrated in the routine workflows. Yeah, so all these approaches, they can be formed by theories and directed with a research question in mind. Yeah, so how do you analyze? Of course, the approach of analyzing, we talked about inductive and deductive. This should be informed by the theory or conceptual framework. And then, of course, this is guided by the research question in mind. And then, of course, how do you, of course, there are two levels of analysis. We have group analysis and individual analysis. Group is looking at group dynamics. For example, how the members of the group talk about the data. And then we have for cross-group comparison and validation. And then you can decide to zero on the individuals in the focus group discussion. How do they communicate? So it can be group, and so the analysis, you can analyze per the group, all those members of the focus group, and it can also be per the individuals within that particular group. Yes, and then of course, how do you analyze and represent the data? Of course, we are going to look at this in detail. Whereby we look at, for example, how do we analyze data? And then next week we shall look at, I said quantitative data analysis. We shall look at introduction to SPSS and also starter. Yeah, starter, so that we can get, and in the morning I'll take you guys through EndNote. These are very heavy softwares. I'll try to see. So I'll request if members can install Starter, or you have copies. I have copies of EndNote. I have EndNote and SPSS, but I don't know whether I have Starter. I will check so that we can install as early as possible. Just a minute. Okay, so of course we look at you hear me talking about categories or themes, illustrative quotes. We are going to look at these in detail as I'm taking you through analysis. Yes, so of course, as focus group discussions, of course you need to look at the coding and the category construction. When you go through a transcript, you've recorded, you have transcribed. Of course, there is what we call coding process. So coding is to identify the themes or the subjects of it. For example, if you go to a transcript and your study is about employees' well-being or using artificial intelligence in healthcare, or or artificial intelligence for disease surveillance. Yeah. Now maybe you want to understand the opinions of of health clinicians and whatever. Someone will come and tell you, artificial intelligence will take us our jobs. If someone, for example, you're in a focus group discussion and this clinician is saying, I worry that AI will take our jobs. For example, if a model is trained to, to interpret the referral notes, or whatever, then it means that a clinician will not have a job. Now, as you're analyzing, you need to understand, what does this imply? What does this mean as far as understanding, as far as this kind of aspect is concerned? So very, very importantly, you need so as you're thinking about, for example, if someone maybe you can get a code or a theme, for example, job loss. Now, as you're saying job loss, we talk about what does that job loss mean. So here you can say participants noted that they feared that using AI for disease surveillance can result in losing jobs. And then you put an illustrative quote that states the verbatim that you have got from the transcript, and you put it there that is in line with what has been discussed. So you have gone to a participant has noted that they worry about losing jobs, and you have gotten your category that is called job loss or a theme, and then you have put an elaboration or a description of what that theme is about in line with what the participants have documented, and then you have put the proof. So the illustrative quotes, they act as evidence that the participants reported that. It's like evidence that the participants reported a given condition. Yeah, so in qualitative research, so as you're noting, you need to note a theme or a category, you need to talk about the description, and then you need to highlight the illustrative quote. So the illustrative quote is the evidence or the words that have been spoken. When you hear words like "Make America Great Again," that is an illustrative quote that was said by Trump. If you hear "Yes, we can," it means that those are words that Barack Obama used during his campaign. If you hear Martin Luther saying the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of merrymaking, but in times of predicament. Now, it means those are the word verbatim that was spoken by Martin Luther King. So illustrative quotes, they are just evidence or word for word that have been highlighted by the participant. We are going to look at this in detail. Yeah, so as you're doing your analysis, of course, what we call coding, you generate what we call a code book. So after having your transcripts, of course, from your focus group discussion, well, these things are cutting across because as we are going to look at interviews, they are the same thing. So you will understand them better. Now, after transcribing, you have to go through those transcripts to get what we call category construction or thematic analysis or themes. So in this case, you generate what they call a code book. So a code book is a list of codes or categories or themes that you have highlighted, their descriptions, and sample illustrative codes. So for example, if you've gotten a code like job loss, and that is participant number 1, that is transcript. The transcript has highlighted, job loss, or loss of jobs. Now, and you look at 5 more transcripts. Is there any other person that talked about job loss? Yes. So you bring that quote that talks about job loss and you put it under that specific theme. So at the end of it all, you will have something. You will have a column of the theme or the code that has been highlighted, the description of what that code is all about in response to what I've just highlighted, and then the word verbatim that has been picked from the transcript, illustrating the words that have been mentioned by the participants themselves, what we call the illustrative quotes. Yes. And then, of course, so And then, of course, as you're analyzing, you need to think, for example, you're analyzing the group dynamics, the emotional reactions, e.g., humor or anger, or the patterns of agreements and disagreements and different opinions. And then, of course, you need to think about what are the interests of the participants or what is at stake and in what ways are they reflected in the data that we have collected. So that marks focus group discussion as one of the methods. So I know most of you, some of you will probably that work in research environments, you maybe you want to carry out focus group discussion for your research objectives or research questions, etc. and etc. Is there any question before we go to interviews? Interviewing for qualitative research?
I don't have a question though.
Okay. Etera kubonyewa. Kale leta chosanga choleta. These I'm asking for a cup of tea, so yeah. All right, so thank you, Baluku. Yes, and now I believe from here you guys are very experts in focus group discussions. So if we asked you to design a focus group discussion, or if you are invited to, if you're invited to do a qualitative a focus group conduct, you know what to do, at least. Now let's quickly now interviewing for qualitative research. It's almost what we are covering, but only that this is just between two people, an interviewer and the interviewee. So these are the notes from Professor Hannah Gilbert from, well, you see they're old notes, 2016. Yeah, so this was by Hannah Gilbert at Harvard University, and they are very wonderful resources that we can learn from. So we are going to run a marathon because so that we cover all these things, but also we learn along the way. So when you talk about, of course, it is important to remind ourselves where we are as far as, you know, qualitative research investigation is concerned. Of course, we've looked at conceptualization, what we did, the design, we looked at the types of, and now we are looking at, we have finished focus groups. We have finished focus group discussions, and then now we are looking at interviewing techniques. Of course, so what is an interview? Of course, this is just a guided conversation between two individuals. Now mark the word two individuals. So as long as, so these are, this is between an interviewer and the interviewee. So when you sit together with a respondent and you ask them questions. So when you look at this picture, you see someone is asking a question and the other is responding, and the process continues. So this can be done face to face or phone or via Zoom or Skype, where as long as there is an interviewer and a respondent. So this yields, of course, narrative data. These are words, not numbers, because like we said, the goal of interviews, it is to gain data, in-depth data about qualitative, about sensitive topics. So why do we do interviews in qualitative research? Of course, to want to understand a research topic from the point of view of persons with the direct experience. Yeah, an individual with the perfect experience. That's why we carry out Thank you so much. Obunyebwa isoganya okumpa obunyebwa. Kale. Kale. Yes. All right. So to understand a research topic from the point of view of the persons with direct experience, and also to elicit first-hand accounts of events and experiences. That's why we carry out interviews. The advantage, of course, it is a technique for collecting detailed, in-depth data, and also for sensitive topics, and also it starts with the individual. It is an inductive approach, like I've described. The individual can provide as much information as they imagine, or as much as they can imagine, but it is flexible, as we are going to be seeing along the way. So we have three main types of qualitative interviews. We have already seen, I think we have looked at some of these. We have, I think I won't repeat this. We talked about semi-structured, minimally structured, semi-structured that looks at questions that are standardized, interview, minimally structured that looks at the topic, interview topics, and then unstructured that looks at the general topic or the general research question. So I will not repeat because we have already looked at that. And then, of course, so we have, of course, a respondent and the interviewer. So we have two types of people in an interview, where we have the respondent and the interviewer. In this case, the respondent is the expert on the subject, because this is the person whose information we want to generate. We want, we want to collect. So an interviewer, a respondent, is an expert on the subject. Yeah, we invite them, and they are telling us what their experience is. Yeah, and then we have they are also their partners. A respondent is a partner that is helping us understand the topic better. That is a respondent. And then, of course, the interviewer himself is the learner. You are the learner. Yeah, you want to learn from the respondent. You are knowledgeable about the topic, but you're not an expert. Yeah, you are naive, humble, but curious. You know little, but you're curious. You want to know more. That is an interviewer. So for you to carry out an interview, it is very important to build a rapport. So, of course, like we have said, some of these participants, they are literally, some of them are scared, some of them are not free, they don't know what to say. So it is important to build a rapport and in interviewing, because we will define a rapport as an interpersonal connection or positive feelings between interviewer and the respondent. When I was in primary or secondary, and it's a new term, and the teacher comes and he's so tough, that's on the first day, it would always create an intimidation spirit in me, that I would feel like, I think this subject is hard. But then there is that lecturer that comes, or teacher that comes, and they are free, and they are trying to help you learn. So at the end of it all, you realize that you actually pass more. You pass the other one that has created, that has taken away the fear, compared to the other one that comes, and if you're climbing a table, you have to fall down, you have to do whatever, you know. And so building a rapport in this, of course, you are a researcher. These people, some of you, especially in health hospital environments, they think you're doctors. But with themselves. And even if you're not, you're just a researcher. So you have to build a connection or positive feelings between the respondent, yeah, and you know, Baluk is saying that's the reason I ran out from math class. Yeah, so you have to. So these initial impressions are important. Yeah, very important, because they can determine whether whether you will get good data from the participant, or you will actually be lied to because someone is intimidated. So initial impressions are important. It's like when you're going on a date, how you present yourself, it can determine whether the date will be successful or not. Yeah, how you dress, how you smell, those are just initial impressions, but they can speak much. Someone can either decide, and how you speak or how you chew. You might be eating food and you're just chewing loudly, and it becomes a turn off. It means that the initial impressions, you were not careful enough. Yeah, yeah. So even in research, you need to think about how to create an initial impression that will make someone feel at home. So be non-judgmental. Some of these participants, maybe a participant comes and they smell, they don't shower, and say, "Hey, you want to move?" Yeah, you can't. As you're doing that, you're chasing away the participant. Yeah, or maybe a participant is there, and maybe so you have to make them feel. You have to make them feel at home. So be non-judgmental, interested in what they are saying, respectful, genuine, and also friendly. Because the goal of building this rapport is to reduce the social distance, so that even when someone felt like they were high up there, but the initial impression you've generated, it has reduced the social distance. So, what are the responsibilities of the interviewer? So, as an interviewer, one of the responsibilities, of course, that you have is to lead the conversation. It's like the facilitator was mentioned in the focus group discussion. Lead the conversation, maintain the focus, introduce the question using the interview guide. And there is what we call probing. Probing is like for greater detail. There are people that don't know how to speak in detail. Ask them, how was the party? The party was good. But how good? So you can probe for more detail, because interviews are just in depth. Yeah, you can probe for more. For example, tell me more about that. What do you mean by that it was good? Why do you select? So you're doing what we call probing. Yeah. And also you can evaluate the discussion, evaluate the unfolding discussion, whether it is relevant or it is going the other way around. Interview guides, of course, they introduce the topic. You need to come up with an interview guide composed of about 10 questions that introduce the topic to be explored, and also ensure that the interaction is focused, and of course, make sure that the questions have been to guide the discussion as you come conversing. So how do we know that we are getting good data? Of course, like we said, specific and concrete, like we have already highlighted. We don't need to explain. We have already given you an example whereby, for example, this one is say, how do you feel about the requirement of treatment supporters? Someone saying treatment supporters are very good. This one we have already given it to you. So make sure it is specific. So this is an example. This is an example of just a transcript. This is a question that from the interviewer, and these words that you see in the quotations, these are words by the these are the verbatim, the illustrative quotes, or the words that have been mentioned or that come from the participants themselves. Yeah, so the quality of the data depends on the quality of the interview guide and on the skill of the interviewer. You can have a good interview guide, but you get vague data. Yeah, so it's very important. You need to strike a balance so that you understand how to interview and how to, So an interview guide is not a substitute for mindful interviewing. So just because you have questions on the interview guide does not mean that you forget about mindful interviewing. We are going to look at what mindful interviewing is all about. So the interviewer must listen actively and think. So some of you, if you're carrying out an interview, don't be on your phone. Yeah, don't be on your phone, mania, whatever. No, it means that you're going to miss important aspects. Don't be on your laptop doing whatever. No, it means that you're going to miss out some important aspects that by the respondent. So you need to think about what we call active listening. Carefully listen as part of mindful interviewing, because as you're listening, you can probe. Someone can say the interview was very good, but how good? You can probe from them. Tell me more about this. Way you can say, tell me more about that. What do you mean by it was good? What do you mean by that? Yeah, that is probing. And then keep track. Active listening helps us keep track of what has been answered, where gaps are, and also to make the respondent feel heard. That's why when you're there, you can be saying, someone is telling you, is talking to you, say, oh, okay, that's good. But some of you, someone is talking to you and you're keeping quiet. It makes them feel like they are not heard. So in mindful interviewing, you have to make sure that the participants have actually been heard. So what are the good listening skills? Don't talk too much. Be interested and pay attention, and follow the thread. If someone has started and they have answered a question 10 on question number 1, you don't have to repeat it again. Yeah. And being neutral as you're interviewing means you're being open-minded, be non-judgmental, avoid assumptions. Don't assume that what you know is what the other person, or what you think is right is also right for the other individual. And also, you must know at the back of your mind, this is not an exam. There are no right or wrong answers. Just listen to what the respondent has mentioned, and it is your role as an analyst to get what is best, and then react neutrally. Yeah. For example, there are people who lie. Someone say, last night I was talking with President Museveni on the phone, and then you say, and as you're responding, it's a sign of disapproval. You understand? But in interviews, you must make sure that you react naturally. You can say, it's the way that, so that someone will not feel like you have not listened what they have told us. So you have to react neutrally. Trust me, there are participants that lie. They can lie to you. They can tell you things. But for them, there is what we call the aspect of social desirability. They want to tell you things that you want to hear. They want to make you happy. Yeah. So, but you have to make sure that you engage them so that they give you the information that you want. Yeah. So we have interviewing for research and interviewing for an intervention. Of course, you interview to make an intervention, to take action, and then also research interviewing to understand the respondent's experience. So in the long, you might find you're interviewing to take action, or you want to understand the interviewer's experiences. Yeah, so those are the types of interviewing. Yeah, so the techniques for interviewing, I've already talked about them. Number 1, use open-ended questions. I've talked about open-ended questions. For example, just put a question and let someone attempt it in a way they feel. So don't come and say, so you are not married. You have already closed it. Yes, it looks like an open, but you have closed it in a way that it's not open-ended. It's actually a leading question. Yeah, so that someone will come and say, they will come and say yes. Now, when they say yes, it means that you will not have any other option or how you can respond. So use open-ended questions, avoid leading questions, probes, use probes, and also direct the conversation. A leading question is like that question I said when you say, so you are not married? And someone will say yes. When they say yes, it means that they have done what? You have finished the conversation. Open-ended question. So using open-ended question, just put the question and let the respondent answer accordingly. Yeah. And then of course, so avoid suggesting answers or limiting the scope of the possible answers. So you have to allow free, spontaneous responses and allow for in-depth information or stories. Yeah, so very important because those are very important aspects. And then open-ended questions, of course, they allow probing into topics of interest. They can gain you insights, and also it can enable you to understand the participants' own words. So closed-ended questions, of course, they define the limit. These are the yes or no responses, like we've already talked about in the questionnaires that we have been discussing. So just an example of a closed-ended question and an open-ended question that you can include in your interview guide. For example, do you have a good relationship with your supervisor? That is closed. You're already defining. It means that someone will come and say, yes, it's a yes or no. But an open, good question is like, tell me about your relationship with your supervisor. Mhm. So that is an example. A closed-ended question: is your doctor a good listener or a bad listener? Instead, you can ask it, tell me about how your doctor listens to you. Are you interested in the career in research? In a career in research, what are your career interests as an open question? So it means this open question, someone can tell you their story. They can even go ahead and tell you why they are choose, what is their choice for that. Yeah. And then number two, leading question, avoid leading questions. These are questions that contain an assumption and they also suggest an answer. For example, you don't seem to care about being punctual for clinic appointments, do you? So there is an assumption that the participant doesn't care. And were you at the library over the weekend? So you're suggesting an answer. Here, someone can lie to you and say, yes, I was at the library. And so you have to avoid some of these leading questions. And then, yeah, so how do you turn these leading questions into better, not non-leading questions? So this one of you don't seem to care about being punctual for clinic. And say, how do you feel when you are late for a clinic appointment? And someone will tell you, I feel very bad, but I don't know what to do about it, etc. and etc. Were you at the library over the weekend? You can say, where were you over the weekend? How well do you get along with your housemates? Tell me about your living situation, like that. Yeah. Because why we want to avoid this is that you may miss out some important aspects that are coming out from the participant as they are telling you about their living situation. Yeah. They will start telling you stories. Say, for example, last time my roommate brought in his boyfriend. I had to sleep outside the whole night. Life is so bad. I wish But if you say, how well do you get along with your housemates? Someone will say bad. But if you don't have the skill to probe for more, it might actually yield into unspecific data. Directing the conversation, very important. Of course, you have the interview guide, but you cannot, like we have already said, do not follow the sequence. If a participant has answered question number 6, on when you ask the question number 2, you don't have to repeat it. Yeah. So it is your responsibility to direct the conversation by applying what we call the mindful interviewing. So very important, don't be a slave to the interview guide. Yeah, just get what is important and just follow through. Yeah, so What are the kind of strategies to direct the conversation? For example, when the respondent is off the track, you can say, that's an important point, but how are you linking it to this? And it is okay to interrupt, but be polite and diplomatic, especially if the respondent is off the track. You can say, that's a very important point, but what do you say about this? Yeah. And then when answers, some people give you vague answers. You can vague is something. Someone gives you something that is not specific and complete. You can use probes to follow up, and you can always clarify to the participant what you don't understand. Say you have mentioned that, but I don't understand it, and they can rephrase it in a better way. You can refer back to the topics of interest, and when the discussion stops or slows down, you can allow for pauses or silences, and then of course you can refer. So for example, you can be interviewing someone and they receive a phone call. As they receive a phone call, of course you have to wait for them to receive a phone call. Yeah. But then after, you can, of course, it means they have forgotten what they were talking about. So you can refer to them and say, before you receive the phone call, we were talking about A, B, C, and D. Tell me now. So, and then they'll be like, hey, on that, I was saying this and that. Yeah. And when the topic is exhausted, you can transit to the next, but you can first ask if there is anything else the participants would like to add. Yeah. Very, very important. Is there any question so far?
Not from me.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So let's proceed. So we have types of interview questions. Now, what is the difference between an interview question and a research question? Is there a difference?
Yes, doctor.
Mhm.
According to me, I think
Mm.
an interview question guides the researcher on how to answer the research questions.
Mm.
I mean, it can be a means of getting information that can be used to answer the research questions.
Mm.
Yeah, okay, that's according to me.
That's wonderful. Any other suggestion or addition? Patience, what do you, Peace, what do you say about this? What is the difference between an interview question and a research question?
With the interview, you have a solution in mind or something, but for research, it is just as if for study purposes.
Did I miss you, please? Oh, my internet is betraying me.
Are you hearing me now?
Now you're loud and clear. Yes, you are saying the interview question.
Is result oriented, like looks to get a solution to the question, but the research question, I think, is just for study purposes or long-term solution aids.
Mm. Thank you so much, please. Yes, Joshua. All right, thank you. So the research question, it is what guides the entire research process. Remember, the research questions they come from the research objectives. Now, the research questions guide us to develop interview questions. For example, it is a broad category. Research question is broader, but interview questions are specific to help us answer the research question. For example, if you have an objective of assessing the acceptability and feasibility of AI in disease surveillance. Now, that is a research question. If you do, in that research question, if you do, for example, the research question becomes, for example, what is the acceptability and feasibility of AI in disease surveillance? Okay? But now, that is a general question. Now, when you go to methods, how are you going to, what do you mean by acceptability and feasibility? Maybe here, this is when you look at, you look at the perceived ease of use, you look at the social influence, you look at the facilitating conditions, you see? Now, but how are you going to get data about those specific aspects? You have to come up with questions that will help us get information about those key parameters that we want to define. And that's what we call the interview question. The interview questions, or those ones that we turn into a questionnaire. Yeah? So the research question is generic, is general, while the interview questions, they are sub-questions under a research question. Sub-questions meant to answer the research question. Yeah, so these questions, of course, like we said, these are pre-designated questions prepared in advance, and they are posed to every respondent. So this one, you translate the research question into questions that can be answered. See? So you have your research question, but when you're developing a questionnaire or an interview guide or a focus group discussion, you need to go ahead and break down simple questions that can be answered by the respondents. Those are called interview questions. Probes, what do we mean by probes? Like I said, these are techniques to add detail on primary questions without influencing the response. These ones encourage the respondents to talk more, they yield more detail, obtain information without changing the focus, and keep the respondents on the topic. These are the examples of probes. For example, silent probes. You guys have your parents. If your mother comes and says, for example, I'm going to make some statements. For example, I can say, hey, Now, these are seemingly same things, but the tone is different. If I say, that means like either there is a sense of disapproval. And if I say, that means that I have understood. If I say, it's like I have, anyway, I hope I've not mixed. There is there is you see, now those are probes, but in your mind they reflect something. Maybe someone has not understood or someone has approved, etc. So you can use some of these probes as you're interviewing. For example, like those, the echo probes, and someone say, I went to Kampala. You can say, hey, you went to Kampala. You understand? That's an echo probe. And then you can say, other suggested probes like, would you tell me more about that? How so? In what ways? What do you mean? What was that like for you? How is it different or anything else? Now, these are sample probes that can be used. So when you probe only when the answer is unclear or incomplete and you require further clarification and details. And then if the the response feels superficial, not enough, not deep enough, or not detailed. And if the respondent hasn't answered the question, that's when you can use the probes. Yeah. So all these are those are very important. Those are different probes. So you can only probe when the answer is vague or incomplete, etc. and etc. So I'm not going to go through these details, but you can go, for example, you can go through, but anyway. So here there is an interviewer, an interview, a question that was asked by to the respondent, and the response. For example, I would like you to tell me what happened on that day when you were circumcised. So when I accepted to be circumcised, the counselor gave me a form which he told me to take to the clinic. That's where I would be circumcised from. I kept the form for this time because by then I was working in town. When I came back this side, I went there. You see, it is a response, but it is vague. Because the question is about what I would like you to tell me what happened on that day you were circumcised. So it's just talking about the form, but not in detail. So it is a superficial. Yeah. So you can add. So, but here now there is a second response. Now this one is without a probe, but this is a response with probe. I'd like you to now. This is the same participant, and they're asking her him to explain properly what happened on that exact day he went for circumcision. And he's saying, I left home with my brother on a motorcycle. We came to the clinic. For him, he was already circumcised. He took me to the counselor at the health center because he knew him. He asked my brother if he had already recovered. Now, this one is telling a story, an account of what actually transpired. So that is how probes. So probes give us detail, but if there was no probe, this information would have jumped and then would have missed the most important aspect. Yeah. So in this case, of course, there are common interviewing pitfalls. For example, making assumptions and asking closed questions. We have said, accepting answers at face value, following the interview guide too closely, and not probing enough. All these can result into superficial or surface level data. And yet the goal of qualitative research is to get in-depth data. So how do we solve these problems? For example, we're going to see how to solve problems. So we have some of there are reluctant respondents, wandering respondents that stray from the topic, vague respondents, when answers don't feel authentic, or social desirability. I've told you social desirability, someone wants to tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you want to hear, not necessarily what you should hear, but what they feel you should hear. And then, so we are going to look at how can we solve, especially when respondent experiences strong emotion, when they request for help or advice. So I think let's take some more water, because the remaining things so that we borrow more 30 minutes. Is that agreeable with you? Or are you understanding any of these things, or I'm just talking to myself?
I'm understanding.
We understand it.
Perfect. All right. So I think allow me just 30 minutes, and then I will so that because even if I leave them with you, you might not read them and understand them, because some of these are practical or things that. So let me try to run through. So based on the research, you most times you meet any one of these participants, the reluctant respondents. So in case you find a respondent that is reluctant to respond to the question, yeah, so you can encourage them to speak freely. Yeah, so you can say, for example, you can say, I understand a lot of people have a hard time, and then, and then as they are hearing that, they will feel encouraged to be continue giving. And then you can also remind, maybe they are reluctant because they have worries of how their confidentiality will be maintained. Yeah. So you can also ask hypothetical questions. For example, what would you do if your application was deleted from your phone, and someone, hey, I would do this and that. You're just simply guiding this respondent to actually give feedback. Then we have wandering respondents. They stray from the topic. You ask them a topic, they stray. So you can always interrupt diplomatically, tell them, you know what, you can feel free to interact. You can use effective body language, for example, stop eye contact. Some people, the more you look at them, the more you encourage them to speak to you. Have you, those of you guys who drive in traffic jam in Kampala? How many times have these Batembe, these guys especially, that come and they want to sell things to you, how often do they come when you're not looking at them? Sometimes they come near a window, but because you're not looking at them, they continue. But if you look at them, they will just come. If you don't want to buy a watch, they will tell you there is a belt. If you don't want to buy a belt, they will tell you all those are. So you need to minimize, you need to avoid eye contact. Yeah, you can also try changing the topic and say, thank you for sharing. Like we have already said, thank you for sharing these ideas. Now we'd like to move on. The vague participants, you can always, this is someone who speaks only in general terms. They are not specific. Probably the participant has not understood the question, so you can rephrase it very well, and you can also probe for more. There are those who, the social desirability aspects, where the participant wants to tell you, because maybe they know that you will feel good about the data, and they tell you what you want to hear. So you can always tell them that there are no right or wrong answers, and there will be no negative consequences. You can express your desire to understand the real experience. Yeah, you can also pose hypothetical questions. And then there are those respondents that experience strong emotions. So, for example, you can be talking about someone and telling them about politics in Uganda, and the respondent remembers how they lost their auntie in Kasese, whatever, and it becomes a problem. So you must allow the respondent time to experience and control emotions. You ask them and they cry. Let them control emotions. Ask them whether they wish to continue, and make the decision to stop the interview and refer the interview to appropriate resources or counseling, etc. Yeah, so very important. If someone is crying, don't come and say, please keep quiet. Let us continue. No, stop, and you can have always another person. There are those that come to you after the interview, they ask you for help. They say, for us, we are poor, we have problems, etc. So you need to be clear about your role. Or like, for example, now we deal with TB patient, and the patient will come and tell you, you know, I experienced this, I urinate, yellow what? Yellow urine. Don't assume the responsibility of the doctor. Just tell them, refer to them that in case of anything, always contact your doctor. Don't come and say, Mania, it is because of the medicine you're taking. Someone can be going through maybe a liver problem. But because you've told them they are going, because you've told them that it's because of the medicine they are taking, then they will go and then they die later. So always specify your role, tell them that you're a researcher and you're not a helping professional. And then some of those that need, you refer them to appropriate resources. Yeah. And so the logistics, they are the same as focus group discussion, the setting, audio recording, and note taking. You remember them. I won't repeat these because we have already talked about the location. Yeah. So interviews can be filled best like how you see these. These are the images. These images were made available for us to use. So you can find the participants in the garden and you ask them, or they can be clinic or offices. You can invite the participant here in the facility and they can provide the information. Recording your data, of course, you can just, like we have already talked about in FGDs, are very important. And then, of course, and then, of course, in an event, where you don't understand the language, let's say you go to a study and, for example, people are speaking Spanish. Like you go to Nachibale refugee setting, people don't know English, and you know English and Runyankole. So what do? We encourage using translators. Just a minute. Okay, so in an event where the place, of course, you can use translators because for them, and then they provide, so they understand. Of course, these translators, you have to get people that will know the language. Now, this, of course, in this case, in such an instance, for example, they can help you understand the language, etc. And then, of course, as you're speaking, some of them they can take. If as you're speaking, questioning the respondent, the translator can change the question, and that is an expensive process, but you can use such a mechanism. And then audios, of course, should always tell the participants that they will be recorded. And we have, for example, one study where a participant refused to participate because we told them that we would record their digital. They thought they would find themselves on Agacho and Chile news. So tips: choose a quiet setting, place the microphone near the respondent, speak clearly and slowly, and always bring extra batteries because those things can misfire. Note taking, I won't talk about that. And interviewing, so that marks the interviewing sessions. So how do we design the interview guides? Like we have already mentioned in the focus group discussions, we won't spend a lot of time. Same things, same aspects. So we have already. So these ones, the practice, of course, we shall develop we shall set, we'll have an assignment about this. We have already talked about the types of interviews. We won't repeat that. The role of the interviewer, we have already talked about that, etc. and etc. So now, so this is just practice. You don't have to do it. It was just there to guide what you need to do. And then, of course, so these are those ones you need to ignore them. Development of an interview guide, we have already talked about them. Of course, we have to introduce the topic to be examined. Of course, ensure we have already looked at, they are the same as the focus group discussion, so no need of looking at them. Research question and the interview question, we have already talked about them, whereby the research question must be translated into specific interview questions. For example, there was a study about contraceptive uptake in Burundi. The research question was about what are the barriers to modern contraceptive use among women in Burundi, and the aim was to identify and describe possible social, psychological, economic, and political barriers contraceptive uptake in the two study districts. So you just make the research question to be answered into answerable questions. These questions should be relevant to the respondent's knowledge. They are made in simple words, concrete and specific, and they should be short. Yes. So this is the interview guide design pyramid. How do you formulate interview guide or interview questions? Begins with a research question on top, We have the interview topics. In that research question, like I gave you, talking about the acceptability and feasibility of AI in disease surveillance. You can look at, for example, the perceived expectance, ease of use. Now those are topics, yeah? And then you get the research questions per those specific topics. So it begins from a generic, so research questions are general and interview questions are specific. Yes, and then of course, these are some of the examples of the questions. Yeah, and then of course, so for example, what kinds of the topics are there in the barriers? For example, you want to look at the experience and behavior, opinion and values, feelings and knowledge, etc. And then you translate them. So these are some of the examples of the questions that can be asked. Usually, an interview guide should not have more than 10 questions. 5 core, 2 introductory, 6 conclusive. So in this, so these are just there to guide you to see how the questions and the topics that were generated. You can add probes, for example, probes like we have already seen to your questions. Yeah, probe for more because like we have already talked about, we won't add them. Some of these are repetitive. We won't add. So you can add the probes. For example, you can add the probes as you're asking or as you're interviewing. Yeah. So the interview app, it begins with the warm-up questions, the core questions or the essentials, and then the wrap-up questions. Yeah. So have the warm-up questions, like we've already seen, the core questions, the gist of the heart of the matter, and then the concluding ones. Yeah. So you have to follow this interview arc as you're coming up with your questions. Yeah. So these are some of the examples of warm-up questions. Thank the respondent, tell the respondent your name, brief statement, say the interview will be confidential. Those are warm-ups. So doing that, and then of course, make sure you obtain informed consent. They have to sign. They have given their consent. Warm-up questions, etc. Do not put your most important or most challenging questions in the introduction. Just keep them in the middle for people to actually respond. And then the core questions, these are most closely related to the research questions. They are most important to the research. They are placed after the respondent is warmed up, but before she's tired. Yeah. And then from general to more specific, they contain more specific, more sensitive questions that come later in the core sequence, and they should include probes. Wrap up. This signal is like as we conclude. What is there anything else I should know, understand, or do you have any questions? Those are wrap up questions. So this is the order that we have already talked about. Provide the introduction, consent. The interview process follows this arc, and you are done with your questions. Yeah, so of course, as you're evaluating, you need to ask yourself, what am I trying to find out with this question? Will this question get me the kind of data that I need? Does this help me to answer my research question? What will it feel like to ask this question? Does it make sense? Or it will be vague? What would it be? What would it be like to respond to this question? Is this question meaningful for my intended interviewee, or is this really important? As you're doing that, you're asking yourself. Yeah, and then we have pilot testing. Always pilot test the guides before data collection and make necessary revisions. We have already talked about it because this is meant to help us in validity and also reliability of the tool. The pilot testing is to help us to see whether the questions are clearly understood by the respondents. Do the questions yield the kind of data that is intended, or the questions, or there are issues with translation or meaningful? So you can have someone interview you using your interview guide, and then you see if it makes sense. Yeah, we have already talked about the interview guide. Don't let it rule you. Yeah, just feel free to pose different questions, mindful interviewing and active listening. Of course, we'll come and develop interview guides, etc. These are just there to guide us, to guide you as you're coming up with your questions and formulating the interview questions. So we have this assignment, designing an interview guide, and then of course it should be about 1 to 1.5 pages long. There's approximately 10 main questions. I'll share a sample interview guide so that you can also come up with something that is in line with what you do. Why is this important? When you get this topic right, then writing your proposal will not be hard, because this is the same method that you will use to come there. Now, is there any question before we go to the last part of data analysis?
Yeah, I don't have any question.
Okay, thank you, Baluku. Joshua, do you have any question?
Not yet.
Not yet. Is what I'm teaching clear, or I'm very
Yes, it's actually understandable. It's very clear.
Okay. All right. Yes, please. Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a very interesting question. And yes, consenting is simply taking someone through, like we saw last time, what this study is all about, and whether they agree to be part of this study. But then you have to tell them that this discussion will be recorded. Now there is a form. That form must be printed. You have the copy, you remain with the copy, and also the respondent is given the copy. If that form means that they have accepted to be part of the study, and we assume that you've explained to them that they will be recorded, you've told them the benefits like that. So recording them without using, that's because someone has accepted. Of course, the consent form must be stamped by the Research Ethics Committee, and it is kept. When the participant signs, then you're able, it is a proof that they have accepted to be part of your study. So those that that is how we do it, and that is the right way. Of course, consent is in many forms, but they have to sign some document. That form must be printed or digitally signed if you're doing an online whatever. If they agree to be part of the study, then that's good. Does that make sense, or I have not? Oh, great. All right. Now, the last part of us is qualitative data analysis. Now, you may wonder, what have we been talking about? We have covered some of it when I was talking about elaborative, when I was talking about the code book, the themes, the inductive, the deductive, all that I have already summarized this, but this is just now the notes to back up what I was talking about. So we are going to look at just overview data analysis, review of data by reading transcripts, open coding and memos, and also data reduction, code book development, and the coding process. So there are two common types of qualitative analysis. We have what we call the grounded theory, which is an inductive approach to development of theory. explanation using coding and category construction. And then we have content analysis, which is an inductive approach to classify text into categories and linking or framing categories to form an explanation. So grounded theory is, if you want to using, do you guys still remember the difference between inductive and deductive? So if it jumps out of your head, remember just that example of a thief. A thief who goes to the house and he knows what to steal, that is deductive. And a thief that goes to a house but does not know what to steal, what he finds that is stealable, he steals it. That's inductive. Now, now these two approaches are inductive, but the grounded theory is, if you want to build a theory, to develop a theory, for example, the implementation of mobile health interventions in low resource settings can only be successful if training, restructuring, incentivization, mandating, and integration are done. Now that is a theory. It means that I went to the data, I carried out codes and constructed a category and came up with a theory. But in content analysis, still, of course, it is a child of grounded theory, because you can't do grounded theory without content analysis. But for it looks at, of course, classifying those categories and linking them to form an explanation. It's not a theory, but just to explain a certain phenomenon. Let's keep on understanding. So when we talk about content analysis, the end point of content analysis, is just the description and explanation answering a particular research question. But the end point of grounded theory is just to come up with an abstract statement or a theory, which is an abstract statement of relationship between phenomena. Like the reason why people go to a club and spend all this time is because they are running away from maybe anger, or maybe running out from their abusive families. So the goal of content analysis is just to describe or explain why certain things are happening, but the goal point of grounded theory is just to develop a theory, like how you see the Keynesian theory, all those theories that you know in your head. Yes, so deductive and inductive, like I already said, inductive begins with, like it starts from an open approach to data, while deductive starts from a conceptual framework to a proposition. I've already explained, usually a proposition is a statement of a potential relationships or a possible explanation. Contracts to hypothesis, it is not predictive. In quantitative research, we talk about hypothesis, where we want to test our data and tested theory. For example, say girls or people that utilize AI for disease, or AI utilization for disease surveillance will lead to better maybe consequences or better what. That is like a hypothesis, but a proposition. But so it is predictive. Now a hypothesis can be null, and it can be true or it cannot be true. But a proposition, but in qualitative research, we look at possible explanations, or what we call a proposition. We propose that this and this is likely to happen, or we propose that maybe inner settings or factors in a facility can result in. So it's just a possible explanation of something, or why is such and such a habit taking place? That is a proposition. So, for example, this is a sample proposition. HIV positive adults initiating care and treatment for HIV in rural southwest Uganda are motivated to reduce alcohol consumption as a result of counseling messages emphasizing the negative impact of alcohol on effectiveness of art. So as you're analyzing, probably this is what you, at the end of it all, you're going to come up, this is what you're going to come up with. Because you've carried out data, you found that people are motivated to reduce alcohol, and because of the counseling messages they receive, etc. And then, of course, for example, TB patients perceived real-time adherence monitoring as being seen, which they took as an opportunity to demonstrate seriousness of commitment to TB treatment and taking responsibility for adherence in order not to disappoint health workers who care for them. So those are propositions. Yeah, so of course you can use a conceptual framework to guide your analysis. For example, this is Utaut model that highlights performance expectance, effort expectance, social norms, facilitating conditions, and all these will result in the use or acceptance of adherence monitors, SMS reminders, and SMS notifications. Yeah, so inductive approach, like I was telling you, it is just about what are these people talking about. It is not about what should these people talk about. So there is a difference. What are these people talking about? It means you go there to find out what they are talking about. But when you say, what should these people talk about? It means that you have a pre-designed concept that you want them to talk about, and you only go to talk. So if, for example, if you are a security person and you want to know about what people are talking about, maybe if they are talking about drugs and whatever, if you come and land on a conversation and people are just talking about other things, it means that you will not consider them. But if you're just a journalist and you want to hear what people are talking about and you get that story, then that's basic. So inductive approach, I think I can't explain it more. And yeah, so we usually, so when you're talking about how you're going to analyze data, these are things you need to think about, like I've already explained. So we use we inductively construct descriptive categories by identifying and grouping related sections of text that speak to a research question. And of course, so these are several activities of analysis. There are softwares that we use to analyze or manage data. We have Atlas TI, we have Deduce, we have NVivo. Some of these, they are good for data management. You can get some time and teach yourself some of these. They are simple tools, yeah, especially to use in your data. Yeah, because of time, we might not go through these things. So what are the activities in the analysis of data? We have reviewing of data. We have data redaction. So reviewing of data involves reading transcripts, open coding, memoing. We have data reduction, or where we develop the code book. We have coding itself, data analysis that involves category construction, an iterative process, and then data interpretation that involves linking categories. So review of data means reading transcripts to get an initial sense of content. What do the transcripts contain data on? And then open coding is just identifying and naming sections of the text judged to be relevant to a research topic. And memoing makes marginal notes to record thoughts about the larger significance of the sections of text. This can lead to ideas about how categories fit together. So review, so open coding is just about you identify the sections of the text that are judged to be relevant, while memory just make marginal notes to, for example, to understand why are these codes like this, to help us explain. We're just documenting why some things are being documented. So there is a data set. There is a study called the Breath Study. This was a prospective cohort study of changes in alcohol use among HIV positive adults entering care and treatment of HIV in rural Uganda. This was by Judith Han at the from 2010 to 2014, and it was a mixed method study, but it had a qualitative sub-study of identifying barriers to and facilitators of reduction in alcohol intake for HIV positive adults initiating care. Yeah, so like we said, open coding, you are just identify and name sections of text judged to be relevant to a research topic. So here, this is an example of open coding. So this is the text. This is an example. He drinks and sometimes misses take the pills. There is a time when he drank. I feared he failed to wake up. I feared he failed to wake up. When the vehicle came to pick him for work, he failed and I hid myself. And I was like, isn't alcohol going to kill him? So this is just a text, the word verbatim from the transcript. But now, as you're coding, we got a code of missing doses. This one in red. It shows that this is missing doses. The person missed doses. And then so it means, so when you go to describe, it means drinking leads to missed doses. Of course, as you're analyzing qualitative data, you have a story that you want to tell. So you must be a good writer to know when you read a transcript, what does it mean? So when you read this text, as far as medication adherence is concerned, you understand that taking alcohol results in missing what? Missing doses, yeah? And then, of course, you can put, for example, and then there is another code of missing work. So he failed to wake up when the vehicle came to, there was, okay. There is a time when he drank, I feared. He failed to wake up when the vehicle came to pick him for work, he failed. That's another code, you know? And so you realize drinking has multiple consequences that involve. So, for example, missing work was another code, and you can put a memo. Of course, memo, these are your initial thoughts about that code. What does this mean based on what you have read? So this one had a memo of, say, drinking has multiple consequences because we see that, first of all, it led to missed doses. Second of all, it led to missing work. And he got a code of drinking has multiple consequences. So if there is a missed dose, then it may result in what we call poor adherence. Another example here is if you have got many thoughts or an issue disturbing you, alcohol helps you to forget the problems and helps your brain focus on something else. So here we got a code of drinking for distraction. Yeah, drinking for distraction, for distraction. And here, of course, it means that, so here, people were drinking to get distracted, and that was the reason for drinking alcohol, to get distracted from problems. So as you're reading the transcripts that you're going to generate, you can also come up with, based on the topic that you have identified or that you have, you can also come up with a relevant section that highlights what the area or the relevant codes and memos that you are interested in. So open code should be a restatement of the text, close to the text, and also slightly summarized version. So we have, of course, data reduction and codebook development. I've already highlighted that when you go to the transcripts and generate, you go to the transcripts and get the codes and the example illustrative codes, you generate a codebook. So that as you're doing that, you're reducing the transcripts. So instead of sending the transcripts to the reviewer, you just simply send a codebook that highlights the key sections of the work that you've identified. So, of course, so data reduction is a management technique for handling large volumes of data generated through qualitative data collection techniques. And it is an analytic process of focusing on data to be used in answering research questions. So coding, this is mostly used approach to data reduction in qualitative analysis. So what is coding? Like we have said, identification and labeling of text. The analyst judges to be relevant for a research question or an analytic goals and assigning the meanings to the text. And that, as you're doing that, this is the first step to category construction. So we have two types of coding. We have open coding that identifies and names sections of text judged to be relevant for a research topic. And we have directed coding that assigns sections of text pre-designated and defined codes using code. And so what is a code book? Of course, a compilation of codes, definitions, and examples to organize and standardize the coding process. And it is a reference tool for coding. It lends consistency in the coding process, and it can be a basis for future analysis for identification of patterns, themes, and variations. What are the components of a code book? We have the code name or the name of the code. We have the code definition. We have illustrative quotes or quotes. So this is an example of a code book. So we have a code name which is missing doses. Remember when we were talking about coding? So you have a code name which is missing doses. What does missing doses mean is so here saying interviewee describes failing to take art medication as prescribed when drinking. And then illustrative quote, the reason it is in quotes, it means it has come from the transcript, or these are the words of the respondents. And here we have drinking for distraction. You put a definition and an example illustrative quotes. Impoverishment, you put a definition and a sample illustrative quote from the transcript. So the code name, it is the researcher. The definition, it is you that defines it, but the illustrative quote must come from the transcript, the words that have been mentioned by the participant. Yeah, so these code books come from descriptive labels, which come from open labeling. Of course, you need to continue to generate open codes until no new codes suggest themselves. So, or you feel you have comprehensively represented the data relevant to your research question, or you run out of time. Of course, now this is just when you come to this illustrative quote, you will find that there are many respondents that actually highlighted drinking for distraction. Yeah, but no, just because 10 people have highlighted an example quote does not mean that you include it in your work. You just select one that is relevant for your work. So how does it start? Open coding, descriptive labeling. You can review, reconsider, and revise, and then select the best quotation. How do you choose among the open codes? You can, for example, based on the relevance of the research question, originality and interest, for example, exciting ideas, potential for contributing to answering the research question, or what we call the meaningfulness, and regularity with which labels appeared in the open coding process. So when you want to come up with your code names, make sure they are short, specific, and reflect groupings with similar ideas. The code, specify the code name. You can use different language than used in the code name. For example, 1 to 2. This is like elaboration or the definition of the code. You can use 1 to 2 sentences to explain what that code is all about, etc. and etc. Codes. These are illustrative of the code. Like I said, we are just defining this table that we saw just right here. This table here. This here we are defining what a code name is, what a definition is, what an illustrative. What have I done now? Okay. Yeah, what an illustrative quote means. And let me see. Yes. So we think that quotes are illustrative, include the same, they can usually come from your initial open coding process. And illustrative quotes are illustrative, they don't speak for themselves. They are the evidence, like I had already told you. Yes, so in this case, so the code name should be short and specific. The definition or the label should specify the code's name in different language. So this missing dose, this definition is the same as interview describing failing take art medication as prescribed when drinking, is the same as missing dose, but it was just changing the name. Yeah. Yes, and then you need to pilot the code book by using it to code new data, and then of course make revision to the code names and also definitions and illustrative codes. Using the code book is a reference tool for coding process. So when 2 codes are suggested by a section of text, decide on one or double code. So in this case, decide on the length of the section of the text to be coded, and be aware of the new ideas that come up and note them for later use. What do you need to create a code book? So this is just an example For example, this is when I have a device. This is just two examples. When I have a device, I know that I must take my medicine so that people who gave it to me will not think that I'm not serious in following instruction. They might think I don't care about my health. I don't want to let them down because they care for me and gave me the device. So here, for example, taking medication, using the medication not to let researchers down, etc., etc. All these are very, so the notes are very elaborate, and you can always follow through to get the relevant information. Now, those of you that will say, so be careful. If you decide and say that you're going to use qualitative or mixed method, you must have any of these. You want to see how you're going to analyze data, which kind of data analytic approach that you're going to use, etc. and etc. And that marks our end of the class. We have covered 210 slides. It's very serious. Is there any question? If there is any question, please, you can raise it. Yes, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Emmanuel. Perfect. You're going to put the number? Yes. Anyone else with a question? Stella? Yes,
I have no
Anthony.
question. I have no question, but thank you for the lecture, Doctor. Thank you
You're
for the
welcome.
class.
You're welcome, Anthony.
Oh,
All right. Stella, do you have any question?
No, doctor.
Perfect. All right. Please, any question? Patrick, Joshua?
They will come along the way, like Emma has said.
Okay. All right. That's very okay. So we have an assignment. So of course, based on your research questions, please generate an interview guide. Generate an interview guide. You can ask, like, for example, 2 people. Just get 2 people, and just because I want you to go through this process and appreciate, so get that interview, ask and record those 2 people, just 2 people, transcribe. I'll give you enough time to do that. Transcribe and then analyze based on this guidance that we have talked about. Use these slides that have already been shared with you. Try to see how you can perform a qualitative analysis. Yeah. And that will be very, very good to go. So try to generate research. Of course, interview guide, try to administer it to 2 people. That means those are 2 transcripts. Of course, you have to come up with a code book summarizing the codes, the descriptions, and the illustrative codes. And then you come up with a summary of your findings. What I didn't show you is how you summarize the findings, but it's just the code that you've highlighted and then the description. Now the description, you describe it, you write a paragraph of what that means, and then the illustrative quote like you have seen. Yeah, and that you can also read for more details. You can always read and refer to this. And yeah, and that's very, how much? 12,000. Okay. Yeah. So if there is no question, I want to thank you for your patience. I think next week we are finishing. Are we finishing? Are we supposed that will be the 5th week or the 6th week?
I think it will be the other week, not this week.
So we still have 2 more.
Yeah, because you are supposed to finish on 6th.
Okay, okay. All right, so that's very okay. We shall keep. So next week, try to install. Try to remember. Joshua, please remind me during the course of the week to share the software EndNote and SPSS, and in case I forget, so that we can start from there and do so that to guide us next weekend, Sunday. Is that clear? Okay.
Yes, it's clear.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening too.
Good evening, Doctor. Thank you for the lecture.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.